Imagine the following. Within 7 years, from 1347 to 1354, one-third of all of Europe just disappeared. Not by war, not by famine, but by something much more appalling. A silent enemy that swept through crowded marketplaces, into magnificent cathedrals, and under the doors of peasant hovels and royal palaces alike with an equal veracity. This was the Black Death, and it would transform the very fabric of European civilization in ways that reverberate in our world today. But what if I were to tell you that this end-of-the-world pandemic, while killing an estimated 75 to 200 million people, would eventually become the driving force behind humanity's greatest quantum leap? Today, we're going to explore one of history's most contradictory events, a tale of unspeakable misery that managed to set the stage for the Renaissance, the Reformation, and modernity as we know it. To understand the magnitude of what was about to unfold, we must first step into the Europe of the early 14th century, a world that would have seemed utterly alien to our modern eyes. This was a continent trapped in the strict social hierarchy of feudalism, where 90% of the population existed as serfs tied to the soil, toiling from dawn to dusk for lords who possessed not only the fields but often the very individuals who worked them. The Catholic Church controlled not only religious life but intellectual life, too, with its monasteries holding the keepers of knowledge and scholarship. Cities were crowded, filthy areas in which waste ran through open streets and families of 6 or more lived in a single room. But this was also an era of unprecedented growth. Europe's population had almost doubled since the year 1000, reaching record levels. Trade routes ranged from London to Constantinople, bearing silks, spices, and, unfortunately, as we will see, something much more deadly. The set was laid for disaster, although few could have dreamed of the extent of what was brewing in the East. Our tale starts not in Europe, but in the remote steppes of Central Asia, where the germ Yersinia pestis had been quietly evolving within marmot and other rodent populations for hundreds of years. But it was in 1346, in the Crimean seaport city of Kaffa, now Feodosia, that this ancient disease would make its jump into human history. The city was being besieged by the Mongol Golden Horde, under the leadership of Khan Janibeg, when tragedy befell the besieging army. Soldiers began to die in gory numbers from a strange disease that produced monstrous black swellings in the armpits and groin, followed by excruciating death within days. In a feat of medieval biological warfare that would be catastrophically successful, the desperate Mongol leaders directed the infected bodies to be catapulted atop the city walls. The horrified Genos traders and defenders, having seen this ghastly display, made a fateful choice. They would depart by sea, taking with them not only their wealth, but unwittingly, the very disease which had killed their foes. As their galleys sailed off into the Black Sea towards Constantinople and further afield, there were portents of doom, spreading death to all ports they visited. 1347 was the start of Europe's worst episode, as merchant ships arriving at ports spoke ever more desperate stories. In October, 12 Genos galleys came into the Sicilian port of Messina, but something was amiss. Most of the sailors on board were already dead, and the survivors were blanketed in black boils and spitting blood. The appalled port officials demanded the ships out, but it was too late. Within days, the people of Messina started falling ill with the same unexplained symptoms. It spread from Sicily like wildfire around the Mediterranean, to Sardinia and Corsica, then on to the major trading towns of Genoa, Pisa, and Venice. In 1348, it had bridged the Alps into France, where it devastated Paris and took Queen Joan of Navarre's life. The disease followed the arteries of commerce and human contact, moving by trade routes with the irresistible force of a rising tide. Nothing could stem it, neither the English Channel that it passed to lay waste to London nor the cold North Sea that it used to send death to the Nordic kingdoms. Already, as early as 1353, even the farthest villages of Greenland had felt its chill. To behold the Black Death was to witness humanity's darkest dream realized. The disease presented itself with fever and shivering, followed by the development of buboes, swollen lymph glands the size of eggs or apples that burst in the groin, armpits, and neck, becoming sickly black or purple in hue, which gave the plague its name of terror. Victims endured agonizing pain as these buboes swelled, frequently bursting to expel foul blood and pus. Victims also developed black spots all over their bodies as blood vessels ruptured under the skin, giving them the appearance of living corpses. In its pneumonic stage, the plague infected the lungs, causing victims to cough up blood in violent, contagious paroxysms that had the potential to transmit the disease on a May breath. Medieval doctors, with nothing more than the ancient dogma of Hippocrates and Galen, were completely powerless. They recommended everything from bloodletting to baning scented woods, from flagellation and prayer to observation of the colors of urine. Some attributed it to miasma, bad air, while others attributed it to planetary movements or the vengeance of God. The saddest irony was that in attempting to assist, physicians tended to spread the disease more rapidly, traveling from patient to patient with infected clothing and equipment, becoming unintentional causes of death. One of the most chilling accounts of this end-of-the-world period is from Giovanni Boccaccio, the Italian author who saw the plague destroy Florence firsthand. In his masterpiece, The Decameron, he so wrote in ghastly detail, "So many bodies were brought to the churches every day that the consecrated ground did not suffice to hold them. But no single person, more than Guy de Chauliac, physician to Pope Clement VI at Avignon, represents the medical heroism of the time." Even without comprehension of bacterial infection, de Chauliac carefully recorded the course of the plague, identifying two forms, bubonic and pneumonic, and noting that the second was highly contagious and lethal. For his bravery in staying to treat patients when all others ran away, he is counted among the great medical pioneers of history. Simultaneously, in England, the plague took one of its most famous victims in Joan of Kent, the mother of the future King Richard II, and on the opposite side of the Channel in France, it took out King Philip VI's daughter-in-law, born of Luxembourg. But for every noble name listed, millions of ordinary folk, farmers, craftsmen, mothers, children, were swept out into nameless graves, their stories lost to the ages, but their aggregate absence remakes the very fabric of society. As the toll of the dead rose, the very fabric of medieval society started to split at the seams. The Catholic Church that had promised salvation and God's protection now appeared helpless against this unseen foe. Whole monasteries were decimated, with some losing every monk or nun. The believers saw priests running from parishes, bishops fleeing dioceses, and even Pope Clement VI himself shutting himself up in his palace in Avignon, surrounded by burning braziers he thought would cleanse the air. This faith crisis gave rise to radical religious movements. The flagellants, who walked from city to city flagellating themselves bloody in public acts of penance, hoping their pain could mollify God's anger. More malevolently, the plague gave rise to anti-Semitic riots as populations in desperation looked for someone to blame for their ordeal. Jewish communities were set ablaze in cities such as Strasbourg and Mainz, blamed for poisoning wells, a ghastly irony, considering that Jewish communities tended to have lower mortality rates due to their ritual cleansing habits. The social compact that had bound feudalism together for so long was crumbling, as lords found themselves bereft of serfs to till their fields, and old hierarchies meant nothing against universal mortality. The Black Death did not merely kill individuals, it killed the medieval economy. With perhaps 40% of Europe's population deceased, the underlying relationship between labor and land was forever changed. Abruptly, surviving peasants were in an unparalleled position of power. Lords who previously enjoyed absolute obedience could now fight over labors, promising higher wages, more favorable working conditions, and even liberation from serfdom. The strict feudal hierarchy that had appeared as solid as the mountains themselves started to disintegrate with the onset of market forces. This produced the Statute of Labors in 1351, a desperate bid by the establishment to cap wages at pre-plague rates. But it was too late. The economic revolution was underway. Agricultural prices collapsed due to a lack of demand, while manufactured items became pricier as skilled craftsmen became scarce commodities. Towns that had lost large numbers offered unprecedented opportunities for the survivors. An apprentice blacksmith may well find himself inheriting several workshops, and merchants may gain enormous tracts of land for a fraction of their previous worth. All this redistribution of wealth and property laid the ground for what later historians referred to as proto-capitalism, as individual initiative came to substitute collective feudal obligations. In the decades that followed the withdrawal of the plague, Europe was transformed into a fundamentally different continent. The colossal depopulation had created an opportunity world for survivors. Vacated lands were repossessed, new technology was established to fill the gap left by lost labors, and social advancement became available for the first time in centuries. The shortage of labor spurred innovation, ranging from farm methods to manufacturing processes. Universities, having lost many of their scholars, started to challenge ancient masters and welcome new notions. This intellectual ferment, supplemented by greater prosperity among the surviving population, provided the conditions for the Renaissance to come to life. The plague had shaken confidence in traditional religious authority, clearing the way for religious reforms and ultimately the Protestant Reformation. Possibly most significantly, the experience of having survived such a disaster had brought to European culture a new respect for individual life and human agency. Art turned its attention to realistic human experience instead of strictly religious content, and literature was probing individual psychology and emotion. The printing press, developed in the wake of the plague, disseminated new ideas more quickly than had ever been possible before, producing an educated public that would ultimately insist on political representation and human rights. As we stand here now in the shadow of our pandemic, the Black Death's history provides both sobering insights and surprising hope. Yes, it was the greatest demographic disaster in human history, a nightmarish record of pain that challenges our imaginations. But from the darkness came the light of human survival and adaptation. The Black Death changed not only Europe but also transformed it, shattering the feudal shackles, triggering intellectual revolution, and finally setting the stage for the contemporary world of democracy, individual rights, and scientific progress that we know today. It serves as a reminder that even during our worst times, human societies have an extraordinary ability to reinvent and renew themselves. The peasants who protested for higher wages, the scholars who challenged ancient knowledge, the artists who extolled the dignity of man, they were all children of disaster, showing that there are times when our greatest tragedies can be the key to our greatest achievements. The Black Death was Europe's darkest moment, but it was also, in many respects, the beginning of the modern era. If this walkthrough of one of history's most pivotal moments has piqued your interest, I'd love to read what you think in the comments below. What in the Black Death's influence caught you by surprise? How can our existing global challenges influence the future in untold manners? And if you have enjoyed exploring this historical turning point, do like and subscribe to our channel and press that notification bell. We have so much more going on in the shape of some amazing stories of human resilience and transformation. Until next time, remember, history isn't just about the past. It is about understanding how extraordinary events go towards shaping the world we experience today.